At what a modern clock might call 2 in the morning, you are an adult novice leaving bed for a meeting with the Psalms. The bell is unmoved by your missing shoe. 2 o'clock is only shorthand. At Christ Church Priory around 1100, night hours change with season. If quiet histories genuinely earn a place in your evening, you may like or subscribe. Tell me where you are listening and your local time. Let the room darken, settle comfortably, and enter the cold passage before the second signal. You do not reach first for a clock, because none is waiting beside the bed. The rule speaks instead of the calculated 8th hour of the night in winter, a division that depends on how long darkness lasts. At Canterbury's latitude, a January night and a June night are plainly not the same piece of time. The house custom must turn that changing darkness into a usable signal, so the title's neat 2 in the morning is a modern label pinned to a moving hour. On some winter nights the waking could fall near that familiar number. In another season, the interval shifts and the dawn office draws closer. Your present concern is less elegant. The dormitory light shows a row of bodies beginning to move, and the monk responsible for rousing the drowsy is already coming nearer. The rule sets the winter rising at the calculated 8th hour of the night, after somewhat more than half of it has passed. That is a moving target, not a clock time. You are several centuries downstream of the text being followed. Benedict wrote in the 6th century, "The house around you is keeping his rule as an 11th century English community understood it." The rule imagines separate beds gathered, where possible, in one common sleeping place. It also orders a light to remain burning until morning, and directs monks to sleep clothed and girded, ready to rise without delay. Those lines were written centuries before this Canterbury winter, and later houses adapted them, but they explain the practical shape of your awakening. You have not been asked to assemble an entire wardrobe in darkness. Tunic and habit are already around you. A covering must be folded aside, a belt checked, footwear found, and dignity recovered in roughly that order. The lamp does not make the room bright. It makes obstacles negotiable. The senior murmurs encouragement to a slower brother, exactly the kind of gentle prompting the rule allows. You swing your feet down and meet the cold floor. The rule tells monks to sleep clothed and girded so they can rise without delay, and to keep a light burning until morning. Both instructions are about speed. Cold is not the purpose of the office, but it has obtained a supporting role. You pull the habit into order, and discover that the cord at your waist has twisted during sleep. Around you, men who have done this for years rise with an economy that makes the novice look extravagantly jointed. One brother has already found both shoes. This seems almost boastful. The signal belongs to a carefully appointed keeper of time, whether the abbot himself or a trusted delegate. It is not a casual noise from someone who happened to wake early. The whole community depends on its accuracy. By the time you have corrected the cord, the line toward the night stair is forming. The ordinary goal is now very clear. Join it, keep silent, and do not force the monk behind you to learn how slowly a novice can locate a doorway. Each monk has his own bed, and where possible the community sleeps in one room under senior supervision. Privacy is not the arrangement's purpose. A practical route carries the community from the dormitory toward the church, so the night office can begin without crossing the whole precinct. Surviving plans and later ruins show how deliberately medieval houses arranged sleeping, worship, care and work around one another, although no plan freezes every detail for this exact year. You follow the darker shape ahead and place a hand briefly against the wall. The stair turns downward. Wool brushes stone. A foot catches, recovers, and continues without comment. Behind you comes the small sound of someone breathing through a nose that would prefer another hour in bed. No one is performing solitary heroics. The passage works because each man keeps pace with the next. At the bottom, the air changes. The dormitory's human warmth gives way to the deeper chill of the church. Dormitories were commonly joined to the church by a night stair or a covered passage, so the walk you are making was built for exactly this hour. A covered passage or night stair existed, so that this walk could happen quickly and without going outside. The architecture is an argument about punctuality. A service called Vigils, the night office, or in later usage matins, is waiting. Medieval terminology is not perfectly tidy, and neither are the customs of every house. What matters here is the act. The community rises during darkness for the work of God. The church is not empty. The sacrist's preparation is visible in the controlled points of light, the cleared way, and the book resting where a reader will need it. You cross toward the choir and remember that your place is determined by the community's order, not by whichever stall appears least cold. A senior lifts 2 fingers, barely moving them, and you correct your course. Great cathedral priory or smaller abbey, a choir can still produce the novice experience of standing confidently in the wrong location. The service has several names in the sources. What matters is that it is the long night office, and that it happens before dawn rather than at it. Christ Church at Canterbury was both a cathedral and a Benedictine monastery, so the same building served 2 purposes at once. You reach the correct stall before the opening. That is the first small success of the night. The rule tells the community to hasten at the signal, while preserving seriousness, an instruction that discourages both dawdling and a race down stone stairs. Men settle into their places. The cantor watches the order of voices. The appointed leader begins, and the first response gathers from the choir. The sound is not loud for the sake of loudness. It has to be shared, measured, and clear enough that many memories move together. Latin words learned over years carry the office forward. You know most of what comes next, which is not the same as knowing it when cold, darkness, and expectation have all arrived at once. Your candle remains upright. Your line in the psalter remains somewhere inside your head. Both conditions require attention. 12 psalms beyond the opening 2, with readings and responsories between them. The shape is fixed even when the hour is not. Why rise at all? The rule gives its answer through the psalms. Praise is offered 7 times in the day, and in the middle of the night the community rises to glorify God. The night office is therefore not an interruption accidentally preserved by stubborn people. It is one of the defining obligations of the life they have chosen. The hours shape time by returning the brothers to common prayer before work, study, food, or private preference can claim the whole day. You do not need to imagine every monk feeling equally alert or equally inspired. Rules organize communities precisely because moods vary. Tonight, your devotion and your sleepiness occupy the same stall. The office does not wait for one of them to defeat the other. The next psalm begins, and you join it with the voice you currently possess. The rule opens the winter office with verses, then Psalm 3 and Psalm 94, then a hymn. You are standing inside a structure older than the building. The office is chanted in Latin and drawn heavily from the Psalter. You are learning a book by singing it repeatedly in the dark. The opening sequence is structured, not improvised. The rule's winter pattern begins with a repeated verse, then Psalm 3 and Psalm 94, followed by a hymn and further psalmody. Local medieval observants could elaborate the arrangement, but the principle remains. Each element tells the next group of voices what kind of attention is required. An antiphon frames a psalm. A response returns after a reading. Standing and sitting are coordinated. You listen for the beginning that belongs to your side of the choir. The first words arrive, and memory catches them. For several lines the work feels almost easy. Then a neighboring voice enters a fraction early. You follow it, and both of you discover that confidence is not the same thing as the cantor's plan. He steadies the pace without turning the correction into a spectacle. A mistake in a psalm, responsory, antiphon, or lesson calls for immediate humble acknowledgement. The correction is expected, which makes it survivable. The Psalter is the great reservoir of this office. Monks learn its texts not as isolated quotations, but as recurring work performed with other people. A page can guide a reader, and a book can hold an assigned text. Yet much of the ordinary chanting depends on trained memory. That memory is physical as well as verbal. One phrase belongs to standing, another to a turn in the melody, another to the moment the opposite choir answers. You feel the sequence return through repetition. The cold still presses through the stall, but it no longer occupies the center of attention. 6 psalms gather and pass. The verse follows. The abbot's blessing makes space for the readings. Benches receive the community, and the change from chanting to listening arrives with a soft collective adjustment of clothing and wood. Most of this is carried in memory rather than read. The book matters at the lectern. In choir, the psalms come from people who already know them. Psalm singing, readings, bells, water and work sounds together made up the cloister's ordinary soundscape. A reader approaches the lectern. The book is not a convenient little volume made for one cold hand. Liturgical books are working objects, copied and maintained, because a community needs reliable words for prayer, reading and song. The rule specifies lessons from scripture and recognized commentaries for the winter office. The reader has been appointed because reading aloud in darkness to a listening choir is a skill. He receives the blessing, finds the place, and begins. You sit with the others and follow meaning by ear. A faint movement of the flame changes the shadows on the page. The reader does not chase it. He adjusts his body, keeps the line, and continues. Somewhere behind you, a novice who had been breathing with suspicious regularity suddenly becomes an exceptionally attentive listener. The rule shortens the summer readings because the nights are shorter, while keeping at least 12 psalms. Length follows daylight. After the lesson comes a responsory. This is not decorative music placed between useful parts. The response lets the community answer what it has heard, returning text through melody and repetition. The cantor's preparation matters because the words and musical shape change with season and feast. You rise when the signal within the chant requires it. The choir separates into voices and joins again. A phrase reaches the stone and returns with enough delay to make one singer briefly uncertain whether he is hearing the brothers or the building. He chooses the brothers. That is wise. The church's resonance may deepen the sound, but it does not know where the next syllable belongs. The responsory closes, and the next reader comes forward. Your task is to remain ready for the psalmody that follows, rather than letting the seated interval become a second dormitory. The seated interval is part of the office, rather than a gap in it. Sitting is a posture with a job. 12 psalms is the floor rather than the ceiling. Readings and responsories sit between them, and the whole thing closes with a set conclusion. 3 lessons and their responses create a measured alternation between receiving and answering. The rule calls for the community to rise at a particular doxology in honor of the Trinity. This means the novice must listen even while seated. You watch the cantor, hear the familiar beginning, and stand with everyone else. A late movement would be visible in the half-light, though not fatal to the salvation of the house. The humour belongs to the practical truth that centuries of custom can still depend on one sleepy man noticing when the bench beneath him has ceased to be appropriate. You notice. The brothers settle again. The final response ends, and the remaining psalms begin. The office has its own architecture now, built not from walls, but from repeated entrances, pauses, readings, and shared conclusions. Ordered choir places mean the office is communal work rather than parallel private prayer. Where you stand is part of what you are doing. The second group of psalms asks a different kind of endurance. You are fully awake now, but wakefulness does not guarantee precision. The mind can wander while the mouth continues. A useful talent in many settings, and a poor one in choir. You bring attention back to the antiphon. The appointed voice begins. Your side answers. The opposite side takes the next portion. Shared chanting divides the weight without reducing responsibility. No brother carries the whole office, yet each can make the common line less steady. That is one reason the novice is trained beside older monks, rather than given a private corner for experimentation. A senior's breath marks the pace. His hand remains still. The correction is almost entirely conveyed by his refusal to follow your hurried syllable. You lengthen the next phrase and return to the community's measure. Alternation teaches by proximity. You learn the community's measure by standing next to people who already have it. You are being trained by proximity rather than instruction, which is slower and considerably more durable. At the end of the psalmody comes a shorter lesson recited from memory, then the verse and petition that close the ordinary winter pattern described by the rule. Canterbury custom in this period could add detail and ceremony, and the exact length of a particular night depended on the calendar. Still, the skeleton is clear. The community has not simply stood in the dark thinking worthy thoughts. It has completed a demanding sequence of text, song, hearing, posture, and response. Your candle has survived. Your line has survived with one repair. The monk beside you has survived your early entrance and appears prepared to forgive it eventually. The final words gather. For a moment, the choir's many voices arrive together with such exactness that the effort behind them becomes invisible. Then the sound ends, and ordinary bodies become noticeable again. Sunday vigils run longer, with additional readings, responsories, canticles, and a gospel lesson. Tonight is the ordinary version. Not every night follows this exact length. Sunday requires an earlier rising and a longer office in the rule, with additional sets of readings and responsories, prophetic canticles, and a gospel lesson. Feast days change assigned psalms, antiphons, and readings. The liturgical calendar can therefore make the same dark church feel like a different practical problem. A novice who has finally mastered the weekday order should not become proud. The next feast is already preparing a thoughtful correction. Tonight is simpler. You remain in place as the conclusion settles, aware that a Sunday version could have kept you listening through many more pages. The office's variation is not accidental clutter. It marks different days as different kinds of sacred time, while the returning structure helps the community find its way through them. Seasons and feasts change the music and the added material. The variation was the system working, not the system failing. Office music and added material shifted with the season and the feast. Nothing about the year was flat. Summer changes the practical mathematics again. From Easter toward November, the rule keeps the psalm count, but reduces the book lessons because the nights are shorter. A single memorized passage replaces the longer winter readings, and the dawn office follows after a brief interval. That is why an exact modern hour cannot define medieval vigils. The office responds to sunset, dawn, season, latitude, and local observance. A June night at Canterbury offers far less darkness than this January one. In summer, there is no generous black interval in which to return mentally to bed. Lords waits near daybreak. You know this as instruction rather than present sensation, because the church around you remains entirely winter. Even so, the comparison answers the title more honestly than a clock face can. The monks wake at a chosen point in the night, not eternally at 2 o'clock. From Easter to November, the rising is arranged so the dawn office follows after only a short interval. The night's shape changes with the year. The variable hour does not mean the community guesses. Someone must judge the time and give the signal carefully enough that the office, the interval, and dawn remain in proper relation. Medieval houses used observation, custom, experience, and increasingly varied timekeeping devices across the centuries. But this night should not be furnished with a modern clock simply because the title has one. The rule places responsibility on the abbot or a trusted brother. Lanfranc's Canterbury constitutions add the practical detail expected in a great house. You experience the result as a bell, not as a calculation. The signal reached the dormitory, bodies moved, the choir assembled, and the office began. The timekeeper's success is almost invisible, because nothing dramatic happened. In an institution built on repeated hours, uneventful accuracy is a considerable achievement. The abbot delegates the time signal to a careful brother. Somebody has to judge the hour, and the whole house depends on that judgment. bells organized rising, prayer, and chapter alike. One instrument ran the community's whole timetable. The novice's mistake earlier has not vanished simply because the office continued. The rule expects a person who errs in a psalm, responsory, antiphon, or lesson to acknowledge it humbly. It does not invite the choir to turn one misplaced syllable into theatre. At the appropriate point, you make the small visible satisfaction taught by the house. The act is uncomfortable because everyone can see it, and merciful because it is brief. Error is named, corrected, and returned to order. No invented punishment is needed. The source itself gives enough friction, a communal discipline in which your voice belongs partly to everyone else. The senior beside you receives your return without expression. His restraint is useful. Had he smiled, you might have remembered the smile instead of the lesson. You stand ready for what comes after the office. Lateness at the night office is marked by standing apart rather than by going back to bed. The correction keeps you inside the work. What follows in winter may be study. The rule assigns the remaining interval after the night office to brothers who need a better knowledge of the Psalter or the lessons. That sentence was written for another century and place, yet it gives the novice a painfully suitable next task. You have just demonstrated that one line could use attention. A senior indicates the book and the place where you will sit. The community does not all make one identical movement. Some duties continue in the church. Some brothers may use the interval differently according to office, ability, and custom. Your path is toward the text. This is not a punishment disguised as education. The night office depends on learned words, and the period before dawn supplies time to strengthen them. You carry the memory of the missed entrance with you, which is an efficient bookmark. In winter, the interval after the office is assigned to study for those who need better knowledge of the Psalter or the lessons. That is you. Study here is remedial in the most practical sense. It exists for those who do not yet know the Psalter or the lessons well enough. The Psalter lies open beneath a steadier light. Parchment, ink, ruling and binding represent skilled labor, and the book is handled as an instrument of the community rather than as a disposable aid. You place your finger near the line without dragging it over the letters. The senior gives the opening, then waits. You repeat it. The phrase that escaped in choir now appears almost embarrassingly obvious on the page. That is another quiet joke supplied by monastic life. A line can be entirely cooperative when no one is listening and become adventurous before the whole community. You try again at the pace of the chant. This time the words meet the remembered melody. The senior moves to the next line, not because perfection has arrived, but because the repair is good enough to be used. Repair rather than perfection is the standard here. A line good enough to use tomorrow is the whole aim of tonight's work. Learning here is not confined to reading letters. You must know where a psalm begins, how an antiphon frames it, when the other side answers, and which feast changes the ordinary sequence. The cantor holds much of that organization. The sacrist prepares the church and its necessary objects. Readers train for public lessons. Seniors carry house custom in posture and timing. The novice enters a web of competencies that no single page contains. You say the next passage from memory, check it against the book, and correct a small substitution. It is less noticeable than the earlier mistake, and therefore more dangerous to learning. The senior taps the right word. The community's night prayer depends on thousands of such small acts of transmission, most of them too ordinary to enter a chronicle. Here, one quiet correction is enough to keep the next night's line intact. The Psalter is learnt across years, not evenings. One corrected line is a reasonable night's progress. Nobody expects the whole Psalter tonight. They expect the line you got wrong to be right the next time it comes round. Beyond the study place, another brother checks a lamp. Someone closes a book already finished with. A reader quietly rehearses a difficult name for the next office. These details do not mean every medieval Benedictine house worked in exactly the same way. The rule gave a framework. Customaries told particular communities how to inhabit it. Actual nights included competence, fatigue, illness, weather, and occasional lateness. Historians must keep those levels separate. You do not need that scholarly warning spoken as a lecture inside the choir. You need its consequence. The scene around you is a careful reconstruction, not a recovered diary of one named novice. The page, office sequence, winter timing, and communal sleeping are sourced. The precise shape of your cold fingers is plausible. They turn the page, which is the quickest possible return from modern caution to medieval work. Rules and customaries describe legislation more than daily practice, so the honest position is that we know the instruction better than the room. Lanfranc's constitutions were compiled around 1077 for Christchurch and were adopted or adapted by several English houses within the following century. The hour before dawn has its own quiet social order. Speech is restrained, directions are brief. A novice is expected to observe before asking the question that observation might answer. You watch the senior mark the division between two portions of text. The light catches the worn edge, where many hands have opened the same place. Repetition has left material evidence in the book, just as it leaves mental paths in the singers. You repeat the section once more. The phrase no longer feels like a loose object you might drop. It has joined the line before it and the response after it. This is why the office can be performed night after night without every brother holding a complete private book. Memory, appointed roles, communal cues, and shared objects support one another. Remove any one of them, and the novice's task becomes much harder. Page, voice, and memory each carry part of the office. No single one of them holds the whole thing. A faint bodily complaint moves through your shoulders. Rising in the night has not made the body disappear. Benedict's rule is severe about giving prayer priority, yet it repeatedly acknowledges physical limits elsewhere. The sick require care. The old receive consideration, climate affects clothing, and seasonal hours alter the schedule. Those adjustments will matter later in the night. For now, you shift without scraping the bench and continue. The senior asks for the line from its beginning. You give it correctly. He asks for the response that follows. You give that too. Approval consists of his closing the book a little, then reopening it to the next section. It is a restrained system of encouragement. No medal is issued for remembering a psalm before dawn. The reward is that tomorrow's communal sound may hold together, because tonight's correction did. The rule relaxes dietary rigor for the very weak, the old, and children. Bodily limits are written into the observance rather than argued against it. The office has also answered a larger question about belief. The monks do not wake because darkness itself is thought superior to daylight, nor because exhaustion is a spiritual trick. They rise because the scriptural pattern of praise includes the night, and the common life assigns that praise a durable place. Darkness removes many competing tasks. It also makes the cost visible. You have left bed, crossed cold stone, kept your place, listened, sung, erred, corrected, and studied. The sequence turns intention into practice. A community can claim that prayer matters. A bell in the deep night tests whether the claim governs time. You speak the next verse at an even pace. The senior nods once. In the economy of this hour, that single movement is lavish. The page is ready to close, and the interval before dawn is narrowing. The reason for rising in the night is the work of God, the communal prayer the rule places at the center of everything else. The rule calls this the work of God, and treats it as the community's central occupation, rather than one activity among many. You return the book as instructed. It belongs to the house's ordered life, and putting it away correctly matters almost as much as finding the line. A volume left in the wrong place can turn the next reader's preparation into a search conducted by lamplight, which is an avoidable form of asceticism. The senior receives it and checks the cover. Around you, brothers move toward the next appointed place. In long winter darkness, the interval between vigils and the dawn office may permit study. In summer, the gap is short enough for little beyond necessary movement. Tonight there is still darkness, but it has changed. The black windows are no longer quite absolute. You cannot yet call that light. You can call it the first hint that the night office has occupied its intended portion of the night and released the community toward morning. By the 11th century, Benedictine houses had already modified how they kept the rule. What you are inside is a local version of it. Legitimate diversity of custom by time and place is the historical position. Two houses following the same rule could keep quite different nights. Before lords, ordinary needs are allowed their brief place. The rule explicitly acknowledges a short interval in summer for the necessities of nature, and practical custom had to account for them in every season. The monastic day may be organized around sacred offices, but bodies continue to make appointments of their own. You follow the permitted route and return promptly. A responsible brother's pre-matins check of dormitory and latrine spaces appears in later evidence linked to Lanfranc's customs, a reminder that communal timing required attention in unglamorous corners. No one needs to become the subject of that inspection tonight. You are fully awake, correctly dressed, and moving in the proper direction. This is a modest achievement, but it places you safely ahead of the possible distinction of being discovered asleep somewhere much less comfortable than your bed. The rule directs monks to leave whatever they are doing at the signal and hurry with seriousness. Hurrying is the instruction. Back near the church, the people who made the office possible become easier to notice. The sacrist has dealt with lights, access, and church furnishings. The cantor has held the order of chant. Readers have managed the lectern and lessons. The timekeeper has judged the hour and sounded the signal. Seniors have roused the drowsy and corrected the novice without stopping the whole machine. Even the book carries the labor of people who prepared parchment, mixed ink, copied text, and repaired binding. Your successful completion is therefore not private. The night office is a communal accomplishment before it is a personal memory. That fact also explains why lateness matters. One missing voice may not destroy a psalm, but repeated disregard would loosen the shared rule that lets dozens of people begin together in darkness. One Canterbury custom sent a responsible monk through the dormitory and latrines before the night office to check nobody had been left behind. The Canterbury novice instructions describe local routines in some detail, including the arrangements around collation and compline. The title can now be answered without pretending the hour was exact. Medieval Benedictine monks in houses like this rose in the deep night because the night office was central to their common vocation. Its timing shifted with the length of darkness, the season, the calendar, and local custom. Once awake, they did not merely stand for a short prayer. They chanted psalms, heard readings, sang responses, observed an ordered ritual, and on winter nights might use the remaining interval to study before the dawn office. You have done each part in miniature. Risen, walked, found your place, kept most of the line, repaired the part you lost, and returned to the book. 2 in the morning is a convenient modern door into the story. Behind that door stands a much more flexible and carefully organized night. The 2 o'clock answer is a modern convenience. The real answer is a calculated hour that moves with the length of the night. Lord's has not yet begun, but the night story is complete. You wait with the community as the first suggestion of morning gathers beyond the walls. The bell that woke you is silent now. Its work has passed into pages, voices, and remembered order. Your left shoe has become less argumentative. Although this may simply be resignation, the novice beside you checks the fold of his sleeve. A reader places the next book. No one announces that a great historical explanation has been achieved. The house continues by preparing the next necessary thing. That is a suitable ending for a story about repeated office. The answer does not arrive as spectacle. It arrives as a community in the correct place, at a seasonally judged hour, completing its night praise and moving onward without losing the shape of the day. Nothing about the night was improvised. It was calculated, delegated, prepared, and repeated. Calculated, delegated, prepared, repeated. Those 4 words carry more of the answer than the hour ever did. To understand how reliably this could happen, You shift your attention from the novice to the brother who prepared the church before the dormitory stirred. He is the sacrist, or one of the men assisting that office, and his ordinary goal is simple to state and difficult to fake. When the community arrives, everything required for worship must already be usable. A dark passage cannot be blocked. A light cannot be forgotten. A book cannot be buried beneath yesterday's materials. The bell must sound at the proper time, whether the duty belongs to him, the prior, or another appointed keeper. He moves through the church while most brothers are still asleep. His work is successful when no one pauses to admire it. The first sign of excellence is that the novice never has to ask where to stand because an essential object is in the way. You never had to ask where anything was, and that is the whole achievement of the people you have not yet met. The sacrist checks one light, then another, shielding the flame as he moves. The rules, dormitory lamp, and medieval evidence for church lighting do not give us a modern brightness level, and no honest reconstruction can measure the exact glow of this night. What matters is function. The brothers need enough light for safe movement, appointed reading, and the handling of necessary objects. Too little creates confusion. Waste is also undesirable. He trims, steadies, and places rather than flooding the church. A wick that leans badly becomes a practical nuisance with theological timing. It waits until the reader has found a difficult passage, then begins to smoke. The sacrist corrects it before that opportunity arises. Beyond the church, the common dormitory remains quiet for a few more moments. Preparation is winning its small race against the bell. You are watching the sacrist work, though you would not have noticed him during the office. His success is measured in things you never had to think about. You are seeing the sacrist's other role. He tends the church and its furnishings, and in some houses the bells fell to him as well. He sets the final book where the appointed reader can reach it, and looks once along the choir. The stalls are empty, but their order is already present in the preparation. A place for the abbot, places for seniors, places where novices will take their cues, a lectern for the lesson, and enough open floor for movement without collision. The sacrist does not perform the cantor's work, and the cantor does not take over every lamp. Monastic office depends on divided responsibility joined at the right moment. The sacrist turns toward the route by which the signal will travel. In another part of the house, the cantor is considering voices, readings, and the demands of the calendar. The novice's night has answered why monks rose. The next story begins with a quieter question. How did all the hidden work behind that rising become dependable enough to repeat tomorrow? You have completed one night. Somebody else made that night possible, and you are about to see how. Before the next night office, the sacrist walks the church in daylight, when faults are easier to see. A loose fitting, a damaged cord, wax where a hand will rest, or a book shifted from its proper place can become an unnecessary difficulty after dark. His work belongs to an office with responsibilities that differed by house, but care of the church and its furnishings commonly sat near its center. He checks what can be checked now, because the deep night is a poor time to discover that an object has acquired a new personality. The bell is not yet sounding, the choir is not yet singing. Even so, Vigils has already begun as labor. You follow him as he lifts a small item, examines it, and returns it to a marked place where another brother will expect it, without needing to search. The rule assigns the signal for the work of God to the abbot or to a careful brother chosen for the duty. That adjective matters. A dramatic brother is not requested, a careful one is. The signal must come neither so early that the house is dragged from the proper order, nor so late that the service presses against what follows. In a world of seasonal hours, timing is a practiced judgment. The sacrist consults the signs and custom available to his house. We do not need to invent a precise device for this night. Canterbury's great community had people responsible for making time communal, and the bell turned their judgment into action. He tests the striker with a restrained movement. The sound is brief, enough to confirm readiness without summoning half the priory by mistake. Accidental matins would be difficult to explain. You would not want this job. Ringing the signal at the wrong hour would wake an entire house into an office that should not yet exist. You should note that responsibilities varied between houses. Who rang, who judged the hour, and who checked the dormitory was a local arrangement. A bell is simple only from a distance. Its sound must reach the people who need it and be recognized among other signals that govern meals, meetings, and prayer. Museum evidence and medieval images show bells regulating monastic routines, while individual houses assign duties in their own ways. The sacrist listens to the dying tone. Stone receives it. Quartz pass it onward. Timber and cloth soften it. And sleeping men must interpret it correctly. He cannot walk behind the sound and explain. The pattern itself must carry meaning. Large communities therefore live inside an acoustic schedule. A bell says rise, another says gather, another may call to table. The brother who gives the signal handles no abstract symbol. He releases movement through stairs, cloister, church, kitchen, and chapter house. Tonight's novice will hear only the command. The sacrist hears the responsibility before it. You have been obeying that bell all night without considering that a person decided when to pull it. Near the choir, the cantor opens the material for the coming office. His concern is not whether the church is physically ready, but whether voices and texts will meet in the correct order. The rule reserves singing and reading for those able to edify the hearers. This does not mean that only flawless men participate. It means appointed parts require preparation. The cantor identifies the antiphons, lessons, and responsories proper to the day. An ordinary weekday is one kind of task. Sunday is longer. A feast brings different material while preserving the house's larger pattern. He assigns a reader who can manage the lesson and considers whether the novice from last night is ready for a small beginning. The novice is not. This judgment, delivered without a speech, protects both the office and the novice from an ambitious disaster before dawn. You are being assessed without being told. The cantor is deciding which voices can carry which parts before anyone sings a note. You are hearing the cantor set beginnings, readers, antiphons, and responsories. All of that is decided before anyone assembles. The book in front of the cantor is a working technology. Its page stores text and sometimes musical direction, but it does not replace trained bodies. A large liturgical volume may serve several singers at once. Other passages are recited from memory. The lector needs a readable lesson. The cantor needs to know beginnings and responses. The community needs enough familiarity to enter together. Medieval monasteries maintained collections for worship, reading, and study because the daily round consumed words at a remarkable rate. The cantor turns a page and finds a correction made by an earlier hand. Scholarship still involves corrections, even when the scholar is standing in a monastery and the correction will be sung by 40 people. He checks the altered line against another source, then marks the place for the reader. Dust is discouraged. Confidence is checked twice. You will sing from memory, and somebody has nonetheless checked the page. The two systems exist to catch each other. A novice approaches for rehearsal. You remain close to his point of view, but the cantor controls the task. He gives the opening syllables of an antiphon and waits. The novice repeats them too quickly. The cantor gives them again, slower, placing the breath where the phrase can support the choir. The third attempt is usable. The lesson is not merely musical. An appointed beginning functions like a hinge. If it enters cleanly, many voices can move through it. If it enters uncertainly, the entire choir hesitates in public darkness. The novice tries once more. His attention has improved because the cantor has reduced the problem to one precise action. Medieval training often survives poorly in records compared with rules and books, yet a liturgy this complex could not continue without repeated instruction. One corrected entrance carries that invisible labor into sound. The reader has a different difficulty. A scriptural lesson must be audible, paced, and accurate, while the community sits listening. The rule describes readings taken from the Old and New Testaments, and from respected commentators. It also places a blessing before the lesson, and a responsory after it. The reader rehearses the first sentence, not because the brothers have never heard Latin, but because a cold church and a distant lectern punish careless consonants. The cantor stops him at a name, asks for it again, and receives a cleaner form. The reader places a small marker at the line. He will not carry every page into the night. He will carry confidence about where to begin. A book may preserve the lesson for centuries. It still needs one adult voice to make the words present to a tired community at the proper pace. You heard that reading as a voice in the dark. It reached you because a book was found, marked, and given to somebody who could deliver it. You are watching information split across a page, a voice, and a trained memory, with no single one of them sufficient. The sacrist returns with news of a light that needs attention. The cantor answers with the location of the lectern. Their exchange is brief because each understands the other's domain. Monastic organization is often described through offices such as sacrist, cantor, cellarer, infirmiera, and prior. Those names can sound like a tidy chart, but the living house depends on handoffs. A light affects reading, a reading affects a responsory, a delayed signal affects the entire sequence. The two men walk to the choir and test the sightline from book to bench. The solution is a slight adjustment, not a rebuilding campaign. That is the scale at which reliable institutions usually survive. Many small decisions made before they become public problems. The novice watches and learns that devotion has a great deal of furniture in it. You are learning that devotion runs on furniture. Lamps, lecterns, markers, and cloths all have to be where they are expected. A feast day complicates the preparation. The rule directs feasts to use the psalms, antiphons, and lessons belonging to that celebration while retaining the prescribed number. Later medieval houses developed rich local calendars and ceremonies, but the evidence warns against assuming one uniform office across Europe. At Canterbury, a cathedral priory with its own saints, patrons, and obligations, the calendar could make certain nights considerably more elaborate. The cantor lays out the changed sequence. A reader receives a different lesson. The sacrist checks an additional object needed for the service. The novice discovers that the ordinary weekday order he has just learned is not a universal law of nature. His face remains disciplined. Internally, the calendar has become a personal adversary. The cantor, who has seen this expression before, points to the first altered antiphon and begins the rehearsal. Your face has apparently already given the game away. Feasts alter the texts, and altered texts mean rehearsal. You will meet altered texts on Sundays and feasts, which is exactly when additional preparation becomes necessary. Sunday is more demanding still. Benedict's rule gives Sunday vigils more lessons and sung responses, followed by prophetic canticles and a gospel reading. The office begins earlier because it contains more. In practice, later custom could elaborate the arrangement further. The cantor counts through the parts, matching each to a prepared voice. One reader is strong but recovering from a cough. Another is clear but less experienced. A third knows the passage and has the unfortunate habit of treating every comma as a personal challenge. The choice is not about prestige. It is about keeping the community's common work intelligible. He assigns the first lesson to the clear reader, the later one to the experienced brother, and gives the third man a shorter part. Quiet administration prevents an unnecessarily heroic reading at an hour when no one has requested one. You benefit from this quiet administration without seeing it. A reader chosen well is a reading you never have to worry about. You will one day be the reader chosen at this hour, and somebody will have judged you ready before you agreed. Books must also survive use. Parchment can crease, stitching can loosen, and repeated turning leaves edges vulnerable. The sacrist or another responsible brother notices a leaf beginning to pull at its binding. He does not perform an elaborate repair beside the choir moments before the office. He secures the volume, finds a serviceable substitute, and sends the damaged book for proper attention in daylight. The goal is continuity without carelessness. Monastic houses were major consumers and makers of books. and their libraries held materials for liturgy, study, and communal reading. Yet a book's sacred content did not make its physical structure immortal. Someone still had to notice the thread. The substitute volume is heavier. The novice carries it with both arms, acquiring immediate respect for the difference between reverence and dropping a gospel book on his foot. You now understand the weight of a gospel book in a way no instruction could have conveyed. The choir stalls receive attention next. A splinter, loose board, or misplaced object can distract a brother through an entire office. The sacrist checks the spaces used by readers and leaders first, then the paths between them. He is not polishing a museum. He is preparing a workplace used for prayer. This distinction keeps the scene human. The choir is architecture, furniture, acoustics, hierarchy, and memory at once. A novice learns where to stand, partly because older bodies have stood there before him. A cantor hears balance, partly because the stalls face one another. A reader projects differently from the lectern than from the bench. The sacrist moves a stool the width of a hand. Nothing about the office's theology changes, but the next procession will avoid an awkward turn. Material order quietly supports spiritual order without becoming identical to it. You found your place easily tonight. That was arranged for you before you woke. You are standing in a precinct with specialized spaces for specialized work, as a 12th century Canterbury plan of the waterworks makes clear. As evening approaches, the cantor gathers the appointed singers for a final passage. He does not rehearse the entire night office. Repetition through daily use already carries much of it. He concentrates on what has changed. The feast antiphon, the difficult response, the name in the lesson, and the novice's entrance. Each man gives the part once. The cantor repairs one interval and lets another imperfection stand because it will not obscure the text or disturb the choir. Skilled direction includes knowing when not to continue correcting. The novice, encouraged by this mercy, immediately offers an unnecessary second attempt. The cantor raises a hand. The first was sufficient. The lesson lands gently. Preparation serves the office, not the performer's appetite for reassurance. Books close, voices rest. The next time these words are spoken, darkness will have returned. You will speak these words again in darkness. The rehearsal is for that darkness, not for now. The sacrist now checks the route from dormitory entrance to choir. In a large medieval precinct, darkness magnifies small uncertainties. A door must open without protest. A passage must remain clear. The community must not arrive at the church and discover that preparation has been left on the floor. He removes a basket used during daytime work and asks that a tool be returned to its proper room. The worker apologizes and carries it away. No punishment is invented, and none is needed. The consequence is obvious. An object misplaced in daylight could trip a sleepy monk at night. The rule treats tools and property as things entrusted to care, while its chapter on faults expects a brother to acknowledge breakage or loss. Here, the matter ends with restoration. The path is clear, and the office has avoided a story it did not require. You would have walked into that obstruction at speed. Somebody moved it, and the office proceeded without incident. The timekeeper's judgment draws closer. Sunset and the expected dawn frame the winter night. But cloud may hide the sky, and habit must support observation. We cannot reconstruct every signal used in Canterbury on every date. The responsible choice is to keep the mechanism broad and the human duty exact. A careful brother determines when the house should rise, then gives a known signal. He compares the night's progress with experience and the customary order. The sacrist waits for his word. The cantor has finished assigning parts. The reader has marked the lesson. The novice has repeated the changed antiphon until it no longer surprises him. Many separate preparations converge on one future sound. That is the central answer of this story. The office becomes reliable because trained people reduce uncertainty before the community wakes. You are the reason all of this happens before the bell. Uncertainty is removed from the house so that a tired community can simply begin. You have now seen both halves. The office you performed and the preparation that made it performable are the same piece of work. Night settles over the priory. The dormitory lamp remains. The church lights are controlled and ready. The book lies open only where exposure is useful. Other volumes are closed and protected. The sacrist makes one final circuit without discovering a new problem. This is fortunate, because late discoveries often arrive with a sense of importance disproportionate to their size. A wick, a latch, a marker, and a bench have all accepted correction. The cantor stands near the choir and reviews the opening in silence. His work is now mostly stored in other people. A reader remembers the first sentence. A singer remembers the response. A novice remembers not to rush. The signal has not sounded, yet the office is already distributed across the house, waiting in prepared bodies and objects. Readiness sits in objects and in trained bodies before it is required. The office exists distributed across the house before it exists as sound. The bell finally sounds. Its first effect is invisible here, because the dormitory is beyond the wall. Then movement begins along the night route. The sacrist watches the entrance, not to count every face as an administrator might, but to see whether the path and light perform as intended. Brothers arrive without collision. The cantor turns toward the choir. The appointed reader reaches the lectern. The novice finds his stall on the first attempt. That small success belongs partly to him, and partly to the people who prepared the space. The opening verse begins. The response returns. Nothing spectacular occurs, and this is the payoff. A complex communal service has started at a seasonally judged hour, because the bell, book, light, route, memory, and human assignments have met without argument. An uneventful opening is the proof. Bell, book, light, route, memory, and assignment all met without argument. Nothing about that opening was remarkable, and that is the entire claim being made for it. The cantor listens through the first antiphon. The novice enters correctly. The reader's difficult name remains in the future, but his posture shows that he knows where it waits. The sacrist steps back from the central action. Preparation should disappear once its purpose is fulfilled. He remains available for a light or object that needs attention, yet he does not hover over every singer. The office now belongs to the community. This division between preparation and performance protects the service from becoming one man's possession. It also allows skilled workers to notice different failures. The cantor hears a wavering entrance. The sacrist sees a flame lean. A senior notices a drowsy novice. Each correction can be small because responsibility has been distributed. The psalm continues, and the house's hidden labor becomes audible only as steadiness. Oversight is distributed rather than central. Several people are watching different things at once. At the lesson, the reader finds the marker immediately. He receives the blessing and begins. The name rehearsed in daylight passes cleanly. A brother who never saw the preparation hears only a competent reading. That is enough. The cantor follows the text, then closes his attention around the coming responsory. The sacrist adjusts no light because the earlier trimming holds. The novice listens instead of rehearsing his own part internally. Another modest advance. Skilled support has not removed effort from the office. It has placed effort where it belongs. The reader still reads, the choir still answers, and the novice still chooses attention. Preparation does not make the work of God effortless. It prevents avoidable disorder from consuming the effort intended for prayer. Preparation does not create devotion. It prevents avoidable disorder from consuming the effort meant for prayer. Order in the material world is not identical to order in the spiritual one, but the first protects the second's attention. When the responsory begins, the changed feast material holds. The opening singer gives the line, the choir receives it, and the answer returns with confidence. The cantor makes no visible correction. He has spent the correction already during rehearsal. The sacrist sees the book remain steady at the lectern. The timekeeper hears the office moving within its expected span. 3 roles, 3 different forms of attention, 1 common result. Medieval monastic worship can look from afar like a single block of chanting. Up close, it is a chain of human tasks, each with practical friction and consequence. A delayed bell shortens an interval, a missing marker delays a reader, a poor entrance unsettles many voices. Tonight, none of those consequences grows. The community completes the response and sits for the next lesson. A feast responsory demands more from everybody and reveals whether the assignments were made well. After the office, the workers do not leave objects wherever the final response ended. The reader returns the volume. The cantor checks the marker and notes one place that will need future practice. The sacrist covers, closes, extinguishes, or secures according to the house's custom and the needs of what follows. We should not invent an exact checklist, but the principle is visible in any institution that repeats delicate work. Completion includes reset. The novice carries the heavier substitute book carefully back to its place. He has learnt that a volume can be spiritually important and physically awkward at the same time. The cantor receives it. The sacrist checks the cleared path. The bell is silent again. Its next duty lies ahead. But this office has been made, performed, and put away. Books are reset for their next use immediately. The office is made, performed, and put away. The office has a next duty already waiting. Putting it away properly is part of performing it. The story closes with the open page becoming a closed book. A final light remains where the night requires it. The sacrist's hand leaves the latch. The cantor's hand leaves the cover. Neither man has done everything, and neither needed to. Their ordinary goals met inside the same office. One kept place, signal, and objects ready. The other kept text, voice, and sequence ready. The community's prayer depended on both, along with readers, seniors, copyists, binders, and the brother who judged the hour. The novice walks back toward the dormitory, knowing slightly more than he did before. He had thought the bell began the office. Now he understands that the bell revealed work already completed. The passage grows quiet behind him, and attention turns toward the bodies, for whom even careful preparation cannot make every night identical. Careful preparation cannot make every night identical, because the bodies arriving at it are not identical. You carry a lamp toward the infirmary side of the precinct, with an older monk walking beside you. He has not joined the common dormitory tonight, because weakness has made the ordinary round harder. The rule places care of the sick before almost everything else, and directs that they have a special room with an attentive servant. Canterbury's later 12th century plan shows a developed infirmary complex, but the precise arrangement around 1100 cannot be mapped room by room. Your task is smaller and safer. Help an adult brother responsible for care bring light, covering, and the next needed drink. The corridor is quiet. The covering has been folded with great confidence, and now refuses to unfold in the direction anyone intended. Once corrected, it lies across the bed, and the older monk's shoulders settle. The rule gives the care of the sick priority, with a special room and attentive service. That is not an exception to the observance, it is part of it. A special room and attentive service are written into the rule for the sick. The infirmary is an instruction, not a concession. The sick brother is not treated as a failed version of a healthy one. Benedict's rule says he is to be served with special care, while also asking him to receive that service without unnecessary demands. The balance is relational rather than mechanical. The infirmary helper checks his breathing, asks a brief question, and adjusts the lamp so its light does not strike his eyes. Whether he attends a particular office depends on condition, judgment, and local practice. The source does not authorize us to invent a dramatic exemption ceremony. It gives a clearer human fact. Sickness is recognized within the rule, and someone must act on that recognition. You place the cup within reach. The helper notes what will be needed before dawn. The community's worship continues, but its common life also includes the brother who cannot stand in choir tonight. Explicit care is not the same as identical treatment. The community's worship continues while one brother cannot attend it. Age receives similar consideration. The rule instructs the superior to take weakness into account and relax the ordinary rigor of food for the old and the young. It does not erase their place in the community. An older monk may still know the Psalter more securely than the novices who can climb the night stair faster. The infirmary helper asks whether he wants the text repeated. The older man gives the opening from memory before the question is finished. His body needs rest, his memory does not. You listen as he supplies a line the novice struggled with earlier. Care changes what is required without declaring the person useless. That distinction matters in a house whose identity depends on shared prayer. The helper covers the cup, checks the bedding, and leaves enough light for the older monk to recognize the room when he wakes. The rule requires kind consideration for the old and for children, and relaxes dietary rigor for them. Winter itself requires judgment. Another chapter of the rule allows clothing to vary with climate and place. That flexibility warns against dressing every Benedictine in one timeless costume and calling the problem solved. Canterbury's damp cold, the resources of the house, the status of garments, and later local custom all matter. You carry a spare covering back toward the dormitory for a brother who has been shivering. The senior responsible for the room decides where it should go. The gesture is practical, not indulgent. A man who spends the night fighting cold will not become a better singer at vigils. The common schedule assumes bodies that can answer it, so the community must preserve those bodies within the limits of its understanding and means. You place the covering at the proper bed and leave the passage clear. Climate and local custom shaped clothing and sleeping arrangements. There is no single medieval answer to how cold a dormitory was. Practical application varied by climate and custom, so how much a brother wore to bed is not something a single source can settle. The common dormitory remains ordered, but order does not mean sameness. Separate beds, senior oversight, a light until morning, and readiness to rise form Benedict's ideal. Later medieval houses could add screens or private spaces, and particular communities arranged sleeping differently. Around 1100, Canterbury custom still has to turn broad instruction into actual beds, routes, duties and exceptions. You watch a senior place younger men among older ones rather than clustering the novices together. The arrangement is meant to support discipline and mutual encouragement. It also spreads experience through the room. When the signal comes, the novice does not wake inside a group of equally uncertain men. He hears an older brother rise beside him. The lesson is carried by movement before any word is needed. Tonight, one bed remains empty because its occupant rests under care elsewhere. The common dormitory was supervised and adaptable rather than uniform. An empty bed tonight is part of that adaptability. Lateness presents a different bodily problem. A brother may be slow because of negligence, confusion, assigned work, or genuine weakness, and the surviving rule does not let us diagnose every case. It does say that a late arrival to the night office should enter rather than remain outside where sleep or idle talk might claim him. He stands in a visible, less honored place and later makes satisfaction. You see a brother arrive after the expected point. He does not turn back. A senior directs him quietly to the appointed place. The office continues. The correction is public enough to matter and limited enough not to swallow the service. We cannot assume every later English house enforced the chapter in exactly the same form, but the principle is clear. Lateness is repaired by rejoining the work, not by abandoning it. The correction for lateness is rejoining the work, not withdrawing from it. Discipline here points inward. Standing apart rather than returning to bed keeps a late arrival visibly within the office. The remedy is participation. The late brother's face is tired, and the sources do not tell you why. This is where restraint matters. It would be easy to invent a comic excuse or a harsh prior, but neither is needed. The human consequence is already present. He stands where the community can see that the signal was missed, joins what remains of the office, and waits to acknowledge the fault. The purpose is amendment, not a display for later audiences. You keep your own place and do not stare. The psalm passes from one side of the choir to the other. His voice enters softly, then steadies. By the end of the section, the common sound has absorbed him, without pretending the delay never happened. Discipline and reintegration occur in the same action. The cause of the lateness is not recorded and does not need to be. The remedy is the same either way. A mistake in reading is handled through a related pattern. The reader catches a skipped phrase, pauses, returns, and makes the expected acknowledgement. The rule condemns refusal to correct more sharply than the original slip. This emphasis reveals what the community is trying to protect. Human beings will misread, forget, arrive late, break an object, or lose a place. The dangerous response is not every error itself, but resistance to repair. You hear the reader resume at the proper line. The cantor gives no extra signal. The brothers answer when the lesson ends. The mistake remains real, yet it no longer controls the office. Later customaries may specify gestures and consequences more exactly, but an honest scene does not need invented severity. A small fault has received a small, visible correction and been returned to useful order. A small, visible acknowledgement returns a small fault to order. Nothing is escalated that does not need to be. Nothing is made larger than it needs to be. A small fault receives a small correction, and the office continues. The prior or abbot must judge cases that the written rule cannot settle by itself. A fever, an elderly brother's weakness, repeated lateness, and a careless mistake do not carry one identical meaning. Benedict repeatedly charges the superior to adapt discipline and care to persons, while later scholarship warns that legislation is not transparent practice. You accompany the infirmary helper to report that the older monk will remain at rest through the next office. The report is accepted. No debate is staged for effect. The decision joins health, observance, and available care. In another case, a pattern of neglect might require firmer correction. Here, the condition is known and the response is proportionate. The helper turns back toward the infirmary with authority to continue the night's care. Superiors were expected to connect the rule to the person in front of them. Judgment was part of the office, not a departure from it. On the return path, you pass the warming place and the entrance toward the cloister. Buildings channel care as surely as they channel prayer. The church gathers the whole community. The dormitory places sleepers under common oversight. The infirmary allows different treatment without removing a brother from monastic life. Kitchens, water systems, and workrooms support bodies that will later stand in choir. Canterbury's surviving and drawn evidence belongs to different phases, so the exact route remains cautious. The functional relationship is firmer. A monastery is not only a church with beds attached. It is a network of spaces that lets prayer, food, sickness, reading, and work continue together. You carry the lamp through that network toward the older monk whose night follows a different schedule. A 12th century Canterbury plan preserves the precinct's waterworks, evidence of a complex of specialized spaces around the community. The precinct held infirmary, kitchen, bakehouse, dormitory, and church as connected working spaces rather than symbolic ones. The older monk is awake when you return. He asks whether the office has begun. The helper answers that the signal is near. The man listens, not for a modern clock, but for the sound that will locate him within the community's time. When the bell comes, it reaches the infirmary more softly than the dormitory. He crosses himself and begins a familiar portion from memory. We should not claim that every sick monk followed this exact private practice. The scene remains plausible and low stakes. A man unable to join the choir still recognizes the hour and participates as he can. You set the lamp where he can see his hands. The common office begins beyond the wall. Here, one quieter voice enters the same night. The sick brother stays connected to the hour, without being held to the same form of it. In the church, the late brother has reached the end of the office with everyone else. He waits for the moment of satisfaction prescribed by custom. The act is brief. The superior receives it, and the man returns to his place in the community's order. The correction does not become his permanent identity. This matters because a system that only exposes faults and never restores usefulness would weaken the very body it tries to discipline. Benedict's rule can sound severe to modern ears, and some chapters plainly are severe. Yet its treatment of lateness keeps the offender inside the office, while its treatment of sickness insists on care. The two provisions belong to one practical problem. How can a demanding common life continue when ordinary people fail, weaken, or need help? Tonight, both men remain within it. Correction and care are the same question asked twice. How does a common life continue when people fail or weaken? The infirmary helper checks the night's supplies. A cup is filled, cloth laid ready, and the lamp made safe. No new doctrine is required. Care becomes credible through objects placed within reach. The older monk's food may be adjusted according to weakness, just as the rule allows relaxation for the sick and elderly. We do not assign a precise menu without evidence. The important consequence is that equal dignity does not require identical portions. The helper records the need in memory and will report it to the appropriate officer. You move the cup 1 hand's width closer. The older man can now reach it without rising. The common life has made an accommodation so ordinary that no chronicler would need to celebrate it. Yet without such work, the great schedule of prayer would rest on neglected bodies. Moderated provision and small acts of attention are what keep the great schedule of prayer from resting on neglected bodies. Dietary relaxation for the weak is explicit in the rule. Care is legislated rather than improvised. A younger novice enters quietly with a message from the dormitory. One brother's cough has worsened. The helper goes to assess him rather than issuing a rule from a distance. You remain with the older monk. The new case may be minor, or it may require a move to the infirmary. The evidence cannot supply a diagnosis, and the story does not need one. What matters is the process. Weakness is noticed, reported, judged, and answered by a person with responsibility. Communal sleeping makes discomfort visible as well as inconvenient. The senior who encourages the drowsy can also notice the genuinely unwell. A common room is therefore not merely a device for discipline. It can support observation and care. The helper returns and says the coughing brother will be brought over before the next office. Noticing is the first step, and is itself a communal duty. Somebody has to be awake enough to hear a cough. You prepare the second bed. The room is not luxurious, but it is set apart for need. Bedding, light, water, and attendance turn separation from the dormitory into care, rather than exclusion. The coughing brother arrives under his own power, assisted at the elbow. He is embarrassed to be the cause of movement at this hour. The helper gives him a simple task. Sit, breathe, and accept the cup. Responsibility can sometimes be reduced to receiving help properly. The older monk shifts his covering so the newcomer has space. No one makes a speech about fellowship. The room itself now holds the evidence. 2 men who will miss or alter part of the common schedule remain under the community's attention, and another monk gives his night to making that possible. One monk gives his night so that another can be absent from choir without being absent from the community. The title story might have suggested a monastery indifferent to sleep, but the fuller record is more complicated. The night office does require waking. The rule also tries to ensure sufficient winter rest before it, shortens summer readings, permits a midday rest in its seasonal schedule, and makes explicit provision for sickness and age. Later practice varied, and no tidy claim about medieval sleep fits every house. At Canterbury around 1100, a novice could still be tired, an older man could be excused, and a late brother could be corrected. You see these conditions beside one another, rather than forcing them into contradiction. The community values the office enough to rise. It values its members enough to make distinctions when bodies cannot answer in the same way. The community makes distinctions precisely because it values its members. Uniformity would be the cheaper answer. Distinctions made for bodies that cannot answer identically are the rule's own solution, not a departure from it. The helper lowers the lamp slightly. The older monk rests. The coughing brother has stopped trying to apologize and begun to breathe more evenly. In the church, the late arrival has completed his satisfaction and returned to ordinary standing. Nothing has been solved forever. Sickness may last, age will not reverse, and tomorrow may contain another missed signal. The night's work is complete at the scale available to it. A cup is reachable. A covering lies flat. A fault has been acknowledged. A place remains open in the community for each man. You leave the infirmary door nearly closed, according to the helper's direction, and carry the empty vessel toward the kitchen side of the precinct. The darkness beyond the cloister has begun to loosen. Small completed actions, not declarations, are how the night's obligations get discharged. The vessel in your hand creates the bridge to morning. It will be washed, filled, and used again. The same is true of the book, bell, stall, and bed. Monastic life depends on recurrence, but recurrence is not repetition without thought. Each cycle requires people to notice what has changed: a feast in the calendar, a damaged page, a sick brother, a colder night, a novice who now remembers one more line. You pass the church entrance and hear the last part of the office settling. Ahead lies the interval before dawn. The novice from the first story will open his psalter. Kitchen servers will begin their own preparation. The community has not escaped the night. It has carried its ordered work through it, making room for both common obligation and individual need. The house has carried its ordered work through the dark and made room for both common obligation and individual need. After the night office, you return to the novice and sit before the open psalter. Winter leaves enough darkness for study before the dawn office. The rule gives this interval to those who need a firmer knowledge of the psalms or readings, and tonight you are plainly among them. The senior points to the line repaired earlier. You speak it once, then again with the surrounding verse. The words now arrive in order. Fatigue remains, but it no longer controls the task. Beyond the page, the house continues quietly. The infirmary lamp is steady. The sacrist has reset the church. The cantor has noted tomorrow's work. Your immediate goal is only to carry this one passage securely into memory before the first light reaches the windows. You touch the edge of the page only where the senior indicates, then lower your hands and repeat the verse from the beginning. The winter interval is assigned to exactly this: learning the psalter and the lessons well enough to be useful in choir. In winter the interval exists precisely for this. Summer removes it, because the dawn office follows almost immediately. The senior closes the book and asks for the passage without it. You begin at the correct place. One phrase hesitates, then follows. The exercise is not private scholarship detached from the community. It prepares your voice for the next time the psalm belongs to the choir. Reading, memory, and worship support one another. When the passage is complete, the senior gives the next opening, and you answer more steadily. The darkness outside has thinned enough to separate the window from the wall. No bell has yet called the dawn office. Time is visible as change rather than a number. You return the book to its rest, preserving the page marker for later use. The senior waits through the pause, rather than supplying the word too quickly, allowing the sequence to return by the work of your own recall. Recall is allowed to do its own work. Supplying the word too quickly would defeat the purpose of the interval. In summer, lords would follow vigils after a much shorter interval. Here in winter, study has occupied the space between them. The distinction shows again why the monastic schedule cannot be reduced to fixed modern hours. Dawn governs the morning office, while the length of night changes the path toward it. You rise when the senior does and carry the closed psalter toward its place. The church is prepared for the next gathering. Brothers emerge from study, care, and other duties. Those who rested in the infirmary remain under attention. The community does not begin a new day by forgetting the night. It brings forward what the night has completed: learnt lines, cared-for bodies, ordered books, and a church ready for praise. You place the volume beside the others and straighten its covering. a small preparation that leaves the next reader an orderly beginning. Lords belongs to daybreak, and in summer it follows the night office after only a short gap. The signal for Lords comes as daybreak nears. You move into choir with less uncertainty than before. The morning office has its own prescribed psalms, canticle, reading, response and prayers within Benedict's framework, later shaped by house custom. The purpose here is not to recite the entire order again. It is to follow the novice's changed action. You find the stall without guidance. You listen for the opening. The voice enters, and yours joins it at the proper pace. Outside, the sky continues to lighten. Inside, the community marks dawn through words it has learnt to carry together. The earlier struggle over one missing phrase has narrowed into a simple duty. Breathe with the group, watch the leader, and answer when required. Competence here is modest and specific. Breathe with the group, watch the leader, answer when required. The dawn office gathers the night toward morning. Psalmody continues, but the quality of attention changes as light begins to touch the church. You no longer hold a candle as the central point of orientation. Faces and stone gradually return. The reader's page becomes easier to see. A brother who spent the night in care is absent from his usual place, and that absence is understood rather than ignored. The choir keeps its order without pretending every stall is filled. You complete the response beside the senior who corrected you. He makes no signal this time. The line has held. As the final portion approaches, you recognize the next response before it is given, and prepare without turning the recognition into haste. Recognition arriving slightly ahead of the response is what training actually feels like. Light is arriving now, and the office you began in full darkness is finishing in something closer to morning. When Lards ends, the community does not dissolve into leisure. The daily round continues through prayer, reading, chapter business, kitchen service, and necessary labor, arranged differently by season and house. You leave the choir with a clearer sense of sequence. The deep night office was not an isolated test placed in the middle of sleep. It was one hinge in a larger pattern. The book studied before dawn will support later prayer. The kitchen will support the bodies that pray. The infirmary will care for those who cannot keep every common movement. Each task leads toward another without becoming less ordinary for its connection. The novice follows that chain now, carrying no grand conclusion from the choir, only a clear next duty and the steadiness to perform it. The daily cycle continues through reading, kitchen service, chapter, and necessary labor. The office is a hinge, not a conclusion. Reading, kitchen service, chapter, and necessary labor continue the day. The night office begins it, rather than completing it. You follow the weekly kitchen server toward the work already waiting. Benedict's rule gives kitchen service its own rotation and expects utensils to be returned clean and accounted for. Canterbury custom would add local detail, but the immediate task remains plain. Water must be carried, vessels checked, and food prepared for the community's appointed meal. The empty cup from the infirmary is washed first. It will return to the brother who needs it. Night care and morning work meet at the basin. You rinse the vessel, set it to drain, and take up the next one. A cloth passes over the rim, water runs away, and the cup joins the small group of objects ready to return to use. The rule places manual labor and daily reading alongside communal prayer. Washing a cup belongs to the same day as singing psalms. In the bakehouse area, preparation has begun before the community eats. Flour, water, fuel, vessels, and timing require attention from people whose labor is rarely named in liturgical descriptions. The rule lists bakery, kitchen, garden, cellar, and crafts among ordinary places where errors may occur and should be acknowledged. You help carry a covered vessel to the proper bench. Nothing is spilled. The worker checks the surface and continues. The monastery's day enters daylight through these restrained acts of competence. Prayer has not ended work, and work has not replaced prayer. Each holds a place within the same ordered life. You steady the vessel while another brother adjusts its covering. and together you leave the bench clear for the work that follows. Bread has to be made whether or not anyone slept. Morning labour is not a lesser activity than the night office. A bell later calls the community to its next appointed movement. The sounds of the house now include water, footsteps, work, and voices used for brief instructions. The strict silence of the night has eased according to custom, though restraint remains. You carry the clean cup back toward the infirmary. The older monk is awake. The coughing brother rests. The helper receives the vessel and reports that both have what they need. Your task ends when the cup is placed within reach again. It began as an empty object in darkness and returns filled in morning light. The helper turns back toward the beds, and you remain only long enough to see that the handoff has required no second explanation. The vessel returns to the infirmary because somebody there still needs it. The errand closes where it began. The novice then crosses the cloister toward the place where the day's assignments will be understood. Medieval chapter houses gave communities space for reading the rule and handling business, though exact Canterbury routines varied. You join the line without needing to be pulled into place. The night has left a lesson beyond the psalm itself. A shared schedule works when each person notices signals, accepts correction, and completes the next duty. The superior addresses the practical needs of the day. A sick brother's work is reassigned. The change is made without turning illness into blame. When your own name is reached, you listen, acknowledge the instruction, and keep the order in mind until the group begins to move. Chapter is where the community's business is handled and work reassigned. Attending it is part of the observance. Chapter handled business and reassignment, which is why attending it mattered as much as attending choir. Your assignment leads toward reading, and then a small task near the garden stores. The rule balances sacred reading with necessary labor according to season. Around the precinct, winter work differs from summer work, just as the office timetable differs. You carry a tool, use it under instruction, and return it to the person responsible. The care given to books is echoed in the care given to tools. Both belong to the community. Both must be ready for the next hand. The sun is now above the horizon, though the air remains cold. At the store, you check the place from which the tool came before setting it down, so the next worker will not need to search. Tools are returned to known places, so the next worker does not have to search. The habit is the same one that governs books. The tool goes back where it was found, which is the same courtesy the books receive. The morning advances. The psalm learnt before dawn remains available in memory, but it no longer demands rehearsal. You can give attention to the present task. A container is moved into shelter, a path is cleared, a message about the infirmary is delivered to the appropriate officer. Each action has a consequence that can be seen. The object is dry, the route is open, the care is continued. This is how the monastery enters daylight. Not through a sudden change of character, but through the same habit of ordered handoffs that carried the office through darkness. You pause at the cleared path. Notice that another brother can now pass without turning aside, and continue toward the next small obligation. The night's discipline shows up in daylight as small courtesies nobody remarks on. By the time the community gathers again, your first waking feels distant but connected. The bell, stair, choir, page, cup, and tool belong to one continuous day. The reason for rising in the night is no longer an abstract rule. It has shaped what you remember, whom you notice, and how you perform ordinary work. The office required preparation. Care required adjustment. Morning required hands already trained to complete a shared task. You take your place at the next signal with less hesitation than before. The senior beside you opens his book. You wait for the common beginning, confident enough now to be attentive rather than merely anxious. Bell, stair, choir, page, cup, and tool belong to one continuous day, rather than to separate compartments of it. Rising in the night has shaped what you remember, whom you notice, and how you do the next ordinary thing. Daylight now reaches the cloister fully. The dormitory has emptied. The church books rest after use. The kitchen vessels are arranged for what follows. In the infirmary, light from the window has replaced the stronger need for a lamp. The novice returns one last marker to the cantor and receives no correction. The action is complete. Night waking has become learned text, completed prayer, tended bodies, and morning work. The community continues without a loud conclusion. You stand for a moment in the open walk, where every object carries the quiet evidence of someone having finished a necessary piece of work. Every object carries the quiet evidence of somebody having finished a necessary piece of work. You pass the night stair again, now visible from end to end. No one is hurrying down it. The handrail, wall, and worn steps remain where darkness left them. Later, another signal will sound, and another office will gather the brothers, but the present task asks for nothing more. You leave the stair behind, cross the quiet edge of the cloister, and carry the memory of the bell without hearing it. The 4 stories have reached their ordinary endings. The final moments will keep only the images already made. The novice's hands are empty now. The book, cup, tool, and lamp have all been returned, each to the place where another person will find it. Each thing has been returned to the place where another person will look for it. That is the whole shape of the day. The dormitory light remains small against the long room. A folded covering lies where a hand left it. The cord at your waist is settled. The shoes are together, and the doorway is easy to find. No signal moves through the dark now. The beds, wall, lamp, and quiet passage hold their familiar places. You rest beside the memory of the first waking, with nothing left to hurry. The covered bed and waiting stool need no further attention. The bell is still. Its shape rests above the spaces it once gathered. Along the covered way, cold stone has lost its sharpness in memory. The stair descends without footsteps. A hand touches the wall, then lifts away. The choir beyond it waits only as an established image. Stalls in order, a lectern ready, and one controlled flame beside a closed book. Only the remembered order of the route remains with you. The psalter opens again to the line already learned. A finger rests near the words without moving them. The page is steady. The remembered phrase follows its neighbour and comes to rest at the end of the verse. The cover closes gently. Nearby, the cup from the infirmary stands within reach, and the folded cloth remains smooth across the bed. The familiar line stays where practice placed it before dawn. Morning work returns in quiet pieces. A clean vessel drains beside the basin. Bread waits where careful hands placed it. A tool has gone back to its proper space. The cloister path is open, and daylight lies across the stone. Each object has completed the movement already given to it. Nothing new is required from the bell, the book, the cup, or the hands. Light touches the vessel, the covering, and the cleared stone. The last image holds the dormitory lamp, the silent bell, the dark stair, the open page, the choir stall, and the first daylight together. The page closes, the lamp remains steady, the stone passage is empty. Bread rests under its covering. The community's finished night settles into these ordinary things, and the room around you may remain dim and undisturbed. All of it remains quiet, complete, and gently held in place.